overlap, and I do look forward to working together on water issues. Mr. Chairman, this is my first hearing at the Water Resources as ranking member, and thank you for your efforts in welcoming me to the subcommittee and for your offer to work collaboratively with our side of the aisle on some issues, including those related to infrastructure investment and implementation of WRDA. While I do not expect that we will always agree, and I say that laughingly, I do look forward to building a strong and transparent working relationship with you and all of the members of this subcommittee. The American people want us to continue the bipartisan traditions of this subcommittee to accomplish tasks that our constituents have sent us here to do, to address the water resources challenges facing our nation. One of the greatest challenges facing today is crumbling infrastructure. And over the years, we've spoken to, listened to countless mayors, city and county officials, stakeholders on the issues to discuss water-related challenges in all of our communities and about the lack of attention or the lack of progress, if you will, in addressing these challenges. Unfortunately, much of the lack of progress can be traced to the slow and steady decline in federal investment to critical water-related infrastructure, which is a good segue to today's hearing on Environmental Protection Agency's 2016 budget request. Very few federal agencies are as praised or as vilified as EPA. Depends on which side of the fence you're on. Depending on your point of view, this agency, which created by a Republican administration and charged by Congress with safeguarding the health of the public and of the environment, is often portrayed either as the last safeguard of our natural environment or as an overzealous impediment to unfettered industrial growth. Well, I'll tell you, I'll go with industrial versus the industrial growth versus our people and our environment. I would tell you where I come from. I suppose the reality is somewhere in the middle, where this agency makes a concerted effort in reaching a sustainable balance between the health of the public, the health of the environment, and the health of the economy, while working with Congress to be effective in attaining these mutual goals. We must agree on the need to balance healthy economic growth while protecting the health of the public and of the environment for generations to come. In my own district, the health of our communities and our economies is integrally tied to the health and availability of the natural resources, and specifically the availability of clean, safe drinking water. Unfortunately, ensuring this careful balance will all but be impossible if EPA must face budgetary cuts called for in the recent House Republican budget resolutions. Back in 2011, Congress approved the Budget Control Act that drastically underfunded the discretionary budget authority of the federal government, including EPA. I voted against the Budget Control Act because of its devastating cuts to both mandatory and discretionary programs relied upon by our nation's seniors, our cities, our communities, and by our constituency. Yet last year, the House Republican majority voted to approve a budget which calls for even greater cuts to these programs, jeopardizing our nation's economic recovery, attacking our nation's efforts to promote a global economy, and undermining efforts to create additional good-paying jobs in the U.S. According to a summary of the budget from 2016, this House majority is urging a drastic reduction in non-defense discretionary spending over the next 10 years, cut by $1.3 trillion, or 24% below the amount, just to keep pace with the inflation. In fiscal 2024 alone, the House budget would be 30% below the amount necessary simply to keep pace with the fiscal year 2014 spending budget. Let's not forget these cuts come at a time when we should increase investment in our crumbling infrastructure. For example, according to EPA's most recent assessment, our states need approximately $300 billion with a B for wastewater and stormwater systems over the next 20 years. Without question, such a draconian proposal would have a devastating impact on our agency's ability to carry out its statutory obligations. As witnesses later will testify, the agency already had to prioritize how to spend its declining resources and has had to make tough choices in not funding programs and policies that are important to our business, to our industries, to our communities, and to our nation. If cuts called for in the Budget Control Act are allowed to continue, or worse, to deepen, as proposed in this budget, there will be consequences in the ability of EPA to meet its statutory obligations, causing unintended and possibly intended consequences. If the cuts are called for in the 2015 Republican budget are implemented, it will impair EPA's ability to respond to industrial spills and other contamination outbreaks that threaten local drinking water, such as recently occurred in North Carolina, in Indiana, in Ohio, in Montana, and West Virginia. It's up to the taxpayer to bear the cost of the cleanup. In all of these instances, EPA officials will provide critical expertise to minimize the extent of the contamination and to restore local drinking water supplies as quickly as possible. Similarly, this subcommittee has heard testimony of a number of businesses and industries that rely on federal regulatory agencies for Clean Water Act permits, and they're concerned with the complexity and delays in obtaining these permits. However, under the budget recommended by the House majority, both the Regulatory Office of the Corps and Permits Division of EPA would face potential significant budget cuts. Result would be it would take longer because of the underfunded staff. Further, if these discretionary spending cuts are implemented uniformly, we would expect continued cuts to other programs with widespread support for our communities, such as the Clean Water and Drinking Water State Revolving Funds, the Superfund cleanup, the brownfields remediation, and we can go on, and I'd just like to say that I've heard others say that cutting the EPA budget will not have an adverse impact on the environment because decreases in federal protection of the environment will be more than made up by the states. I got news for you. To the best of my knowledge, not the case. States are asking for more support because of the serious budget cuts they face. Last Congress, GAO identified several states where cuts to the federal environmental grant programs will result in reductions of state environmental staffing, cutting less critical programs and increasing state fees. The list goes on. In conclusion, if members are planning to question this administration's commitment to addressing the environmental challenges facing our nation, perhaps we first should look in the mirror and ask whether this Congress is meeting our commitment to the environmental, to our business, in terms of providing critical resources necessary for its protection, for the sustained health of our populations and of our future economies. In short, I believe the answer is no, and I fear that we will soon see the consequences of a lack of fiscal foresight through continued crumbling water infrastructure, declining environmental quality, and worse still, handing our children, our great-grandchildren, and their progeny a world on a less environmental sustainable path than we have inherited. So thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I look forward to this hearing.
Thank you, and I also look forward to working with you in the full subcommittee and the implementation of WERDA. We're going to have some hearings